I know this movie was originally not going to release on Valentine's Day weekend. It was meant to come out in December 2019, but both due to the pandemic and Disney buying 20th Century Fox, it was delayed to February 2022. But in some ways, I think coming out Valentine's Day weekend was the best choice, considering it might be a romance movie on how they say the word love like 50 to 100 times in this movie. So, Death on the Nile is a standalone sequel to Murder on the Orient Express from 2017, from the same writer of that movie, Michael Green, and the same director and star, Kenneth Branagh, both based on the same Agatha Christie novels about the theft of Hercule Periot. I have honestly no idea if I'm saying this right. I never read an Agatha Christie novel. I, of course, know they're good, but the only other example I technically seen of her work was the 1945 adaptation of her novel, which the actual original name of the novel is so hilarious, but I can't say because of the reasons you'll know if you just Google it, which that movie is, And Then There Were None, which I did after I watched the movie, learning of the changed ending. I technically saw the opening for Murder on the Orient Express when I went on a plane to Florida a year or two ago, which helped introduce the character of Poriot, but then I found out Kingsman The Secret Service was on, so I watched that instead. It's not that I wasn't interested, it's just because I already know what happens. Murder on the Orient Express has been both homaged and parodied so much whenever I see murder mystery on a train more than less of the time, for me anyways, it's usually the same reason that only could come from this classic. Murder mysteries for me always been something I've been mixed about as a whole, where it's either too complicated to make a good guess or too easy for me to figure out. So it's hard for me to think of working examples, but sometimes a movie I can easily guess who the killer is still works. I met plenty of people who didn't like Knives Out, but I love that movie still to this day, and I'm excited for the sequel later this year. Some movies, despite the twist being so well known, like The Sixth Sense, where despite me knowing it, I still enjoyed and becoming surprised by other things I didn't know about prior to watching the movie. In this movie's case, I knew nothing about Death on the Nile. None of the characters, none of the story, or other than seeing the trailer run out for it probably 100 times. So that's when I decided to go see it, because that's how they get you. I honestly didn't even know who the cast was there, and then obviously that one character slash actor they showed so much in the advertising, I knew he slash she would be either the victim or the killer. Well, that said, what's the movie about? Death on the Nile weirdly starts off with a black and white war movie that serves as a backstory where Hercule Periot, played by Kenneth Branagh, on how he became a detective. He figured out the right time to help the Allied forces fight, and while he was right, gained a massive scar that his love at the time told him to grow a mustache to cover it up. I think that part was a little subtle. They didn't outright say that's also why he needs a cane, but hold on, it gets so much less subtle later on. Years later, Periot is now the detective everyone knows by name, but those closest to him see him differently. I actually wonder if anyone's described him that way. Anyways, plot. So Poriot is on vacation trying to avoid the case, again, when he stumbles upon his friend Bouc, played by Tom Bateman, in Egypt. So the latter invites him to a party where several guests join the honeymoon of Simon Doyle, played by Armie Hammer, and his new wife, Linnet Ridgeway, played by Gal Gadot. It becomes awkward though, as it turns out Simon's ex-fiancé, Jackie, played by Emma Mackey, is now stalking him since she is the reason the two met, and only 6 weeks later, he broke up with her to marry Gal Gadot. Or Gadot, I always forget how it's pronounced. I mean, and never mind. It's just to mess with them or something. But is it to mess with them or something more? The honeymoon is also joined by several other guests who might seem nice but also shady at the same time. And as much as Poriot wants to just relax, soon enough a murder happens on a cruise ship as Poriot must figure out who did it before things get worse. Wait a second! Ah, here it is. Yeah, it's stuff like this where I have to say spoilers from here on out to actually talk about the plot, so just skip the rest of the review and look at the score at the end, I guess. It is a murder mystery, so I do have to talk about the mystery and the murder, if it works or not. I mean, it kind of doesn't and does at the same time. I'll give the movie this. It was worth seeing on the big screen in some ways, considering how kind of a small story it is where it just needed to be on the cruise ship to work. Branagh knows how to make the locations look grand and gorgeous, but honestly, if I watched this at home, I don't know if then it worked for me. The moment I knew what was going to happen, when an obvious scene comes where Jackie shows off she has a gun to Poriot, I knew she was trying to frame someone, because who tells a detective they have a gun? I was kind of thrown off when Erica just came on screen, but not for the intended reasons. Considering how Simon left Jackie was off screen and marrying Gadot was too quick and abrupt, I thought it would be way too obvious they'd be the killer. So when they show a wide selection of other possible suspects, I knew that would be red herrings. I kind of thought who else did it, but by that point when I thought I was right, I knew it would go into the direction I thought it would, and it was who I thought it was going to be to begin with. I forgot where I read this, but I saw someone say how, while you might think at first mystery is too easy, it becomes more unclear how you can be thrown off by the other characters. I guess I can see that, but that doesn't make up for the other movie's problems. This movie is super slow, and for a murder mystery, they take way too long for the actual murder to happen, since they try to have setups for other suspects, including Bouc straight up talking about other people as if they were suspects, despite the murder not happening yet. I don't know how much of the dialogue was taken from the book, but there were so many dumb lines about trying so many ways to say some people kill for love. Which I guess is the theme of the movie, since everyone's motives were love-related in some way, I guess, but it gets talked about so much, I started to roll my eyes. Ow. Other things were also obvious, like someone steals red paint, like what else could it be used for other than to fake blood? It's just stuff like that where I don't know if the movie is clever as it thinks it is. I don't know what they changed from the book, but as someone seeing the story for the first time, it worked enough for me to be entertained by it, to watch it, but I don't think it was as great as the filmmakers just thought it would be, only for the execution to save the movie. As I already said about the movie being grand and beautiful to look at, it is well acted, and honestly, I'm surprised who some of the cast was, like Russell Brand for one. It was that unrecognizable for me. This movie is more than just well acted and well looking, but it doesn't have a lot to work with at the center of a murder mystery, that the murder mystery doesn't really work. If you're a fan of the genre though, I would still recommend it. I think some stuff was dumb, like there's a conversation early on about talking about mummies being buried with their loves by force, and when all the victims at the end were wrapped in bandages to look like mummies, I actually giggled at how unsettled that was. I still think the movie works. It's still a good cinematic experience, and I was entertained from beginning to end, and it is an enjoyable time at the theater where I'm watching great acting and great performances. Its worst choices are just alright, and it's no mystery what I think of the movie any longer. I thought it was good, and nothing more. I give Death on the Nile a 7 out of 10.